are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, brought to you by On Location. I am your host, Kate Magdziuk. You can follow me on Twitter at FFBallBlast. My co-host, Marcus Mosher, joins me here. You can follow him on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. We come to you ahead of a big Week 14 slate, but of course, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, Marcus. It's big.
What's that?
Big yellow and black elephant. And
I thought about today, Kate, anytime I had like a good point on the show, like I made a solid take or whatever, just to like take 5 seconds and like make a little first down gesture. Just to take up some
I
of
think
the time
that's
on
the
the
biggest
show.
takeaway. Like takeaways from football, the Vikings defense, not good. Prevent defense is stupid.
It really is.
More takeaways. Chase Claypool has no football IQ, and Dalvin Cook is a psychotic freak. He's
27
amazing.
carries for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, 1 reception for 17 yards. It got just a huge workload in this game, 11 days after dislocating his shoulder. I mean, we can talk about him, but I actually think the bigger story here, Kate, is Justin Jefferson. There is a world in which they play that game again, and he scores like 5 touchdowns. I think that was the most. Actually, I know that was the game when he had the most end zone targets of his career and ended up with 1 touchdown. There was 5 different drives where he touched the ball in the end zone with at least one hand, and he was only able to come up with 1 touchdown. So we don't know how long Adam Thielen's going to be out. It sounds like a high ankle injury, but Justin Jefferson saw 15 targets in this game, in a game which they were leading basically the entire way. He's going to be an absolute star for your fantasy teams as we go into the playoffs, right?
Oh, absolutely. The absence of Adam Thielen just provides so much of those end zone opportunities, and that's exactly what came to fruition there in prime time. Listen to this. Over the last 5 weeks, Justin Jefferson is on a ridiculous pace. 5 games, all right? He would be on pace for 125 receptions, 2,099 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns. That is incredible.
Like season, right?
We forget that this guy is in his 2nd year in the league. He is only 22 years old. If you need more of an argument for him as your wide receiver 1, I think that's it. That's your whole argument.
He's putting up Cooper Kupp numbers, right?
Yeah, and Cooper Kupp's an old man.
The Cooper Kupp is ridiculous. I just want to keep saying that on every show. I don't know why the Dynasty community hates him. I know why. It's because he's old.
We're ageist.
We are ageist. I think Justin Jefferson continues to solidify his spot as wide receiver 1. He's maybe not as flashy as Jamar Chase or people. He doesn't have the same build as DK Metcalf or somebody like that, but I just think I trust him more than anybody else.
Give him the crown.
Yeah, I agree with you. We should talk about the Steelers. Najee actually ended up turning this into a pretty good game for him, considering the game script was absolutely awful, right? 20 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown, 3 receptions for 10 yards and a touchdown. I actually think this is one of his better rushing games of his career. Like, he ran hard. There was a couple times where he was hit 2 or 3 yards behind the backfield and ended up getting a first down when he had no business doing so. I thought he played really well.
Absolutely. I think this was a really nice just statement game because I feel like the Steelers looked like they were just clocked out. They before they took off and randomly scored 29 points, everybody looked a bit defeated, but I think it was Najee Harris that just kept grinding. And I feel like it's Najee Harris's spirit. I love Najee Harris. But his ability to gain yards after contact, his strength on the field, and you also saw him make, a very nice catch for a crucial first down there with just the game on the line. Najee Harris is, I think, deservingly top 3 dynasty running back.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the last couple of shows, right? Like we both have Jonathan Taylor as number 1. And then it's really I think it's DeAndre Swift deserves to be in the conversation. Najee absolutely deserves to be in there as well. I think you can make an argument that Najee's 2 or 4. I mean, just kind of depends on what you value, but he's absolutely stud.
But
I got two.
this is what he does. Like, let me just point out, like, this is ugly offense, Najee Harris. Could you imagine what he would do if there was capable play calling, if there was any sort of offensive line? Like, there was no blocking in this game for any moment in time. It was
You're not saying
absolutely
Matt Canada's
atrocious.
a capable play caller?
What would he do on a good with a good offensive line?
Yeah, I agree with you. I got 2 more players to just talk to you really quickly about in this game. Stay with the Steelers. James Washington, 4 for 65 and a touchdown on 6 targets. I don't think you're probably going to start him at all the rest of the season, but he's an interesting deep dive dynasty guy because he's a free agent after this year. He has to be traded. So my gut tells me he's probably not coming back next year, Kate. He's going to want to go somewhere where he can get more playing time. But anytime that he's been in the lineup, he's produced. So I think on the right team with the right amount of snaps, he could be somebody who could give you wide receiver 3 value.
I actually really like that. He's a big play guy. Like that's his signature move. Throw the ball up in the air, give him an opportunity to make a play on the ball. And he usually comes down with a touchdown when he's given the opportunity. I love that. I think that's a great buy low.
The other one, just quickly before we move on, is KJ Osborne. Now, this is back-to-back games that he scored a touchdown with Adam Thielen out of the lineup. 16 total targets over the last 2 weeks. Again, probably somebody that you're not starting, although he is averaging 65 yards in those 2 games. But just a little bit of an interesting deep dive player, right? Only 24 years old. Has been in this offense for 2 years now. I'm just keeping an eye on him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. While he's this low on the totem pole, like he's ingrained as this team's wide receiver 3, but with Adam Thielen out of the lineup, he's got a lot of opportunities. Would you feel comfortable starting him in your fantasy playoffs? That's the biggest question. They've got the Bears, Rams, and then the Packers coming up. I don't think you can trust him here on out, though he's been very serviceable to you this far.
I'm glad that you brought up the fantasy playoffs because I want to talk about some strategy for the playoffs because I know at least a lot of my leagues, they start next week. You guys might have some leagues out there where they start this week. So we want to give you some just general strategy going into these games. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about On Location. Super Bowl 56 at SoFi is less than 100 days away. And On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact seats and choose from elite experiences featuring exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star LA hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. That is onlocationexp.com/SB56. Also want to tell you guys about Built Bar. You know Built Bar. It's absolutely fantastic. I had somebody come up to me this week that I wouldn't think would ever listen to a podcast of mine. And they said, "Hey, Marcus, I was listening to your show and I ordered some Built Bars for my son and he absolutely loves them." So that was fantastic.
Did he say what flavor?
Yeah. I mean, he got the coconut brownie chunk, which is my personal favorite. So it just made me feel great. But Built Bars are for everybody. They've got just real chocolate, amazing flavors. It's a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste fantastic. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next box at BuiltBar.com. All right, Kate, let's talk about the playoffs. I actually asked you a question pre-show, and I'm curious to hear your answer, but how do you deal with players going into the playoffs that have missed time? So, for an example, we'll just use the Titans because everybody's injured there. Julio Jones was activated off the IR list this week. He might play this week. He might not, but he should be back next week. AJ Brown on the injured reserve list could come back next week. And then Derrick Henry, there's been some rumors that maybe week 17, week 18, he comes back. Do you just instantly trust these studs and put them back into your lineup? Or do you have to kind of use some discretion here?
I think you have to use some discretion. So let me go back to one of your first players that you mentioned, AJ Brown. Through 10 active games, he was averaging 12.7 PPR points a game. And that's with a 27-point performance and a 31-point performance to offset some of those negative games. He's performed as a wide receiver 3 in 70% of his active games this year. So my question generally when I'm trying to make this decision is, what is the upside, and is that upside worth the low ceiling? For me, I don't think AJ Brown has had that upside this season. I know he hasn't been healthy, but wide receiver 3, he's killed you some weeks. He's really, really hurt your lineups, not even putting up 10 points on the board. And 6 out of his 10 weeks active.
Jeez.
That kills you. That will kill your week. I don't think the upside is high enough there for me to make that consideration. But sometimes when the matchup is juicy, it's tempting.
What about somebody like Antonio Brown, who missed some time with it, was an ankle injury, I believe, and then he got suspended, but the belief is that he'll be 100% when he comes off this suspension. Is that somebody that you would trust in week 17 in the playoffs?
Yes, actually.
I know we shouldn't say the word trust and Antonio Brown together, but we just did.
Yes, weird sentence, but okay. Let me show you the difference between Antonio Brown. The thing that gives me a little bit more confidence with this guy as opposed to a AJ Brown is that A, we've seen the upside this season. B, we've seen what he can do, just walking into this offense with no practice time. He steps into this offense and he's immediately involved. It's not like he eases his way back in. We've seen him go from 0 to 60 in this offense, and I feel comfortable with that. Week 17, Antonio Brown gets the Jets. How do you not want to start that?
Yep. I kind of agree with you. I think that one, because he's had so much time off, I think it makes sense. I'm going to give you another one. All right. Darren Waller, not expected to play this week, but he's listed as day-to-day, could play next week. Do you play like Darren Waller over, let's say you had Tyler Higbee in your lineup or on your team, who was 5 for 40 last week? Do you just instantly insert Waller back into your spot?
This one's actually a little bit harder, and it really shouldn't be. But Darren Waller's been super, I don't want to say disappointing because he's still produced for your season, but we have not gotten the PPR value out of Darren Waller as we all expected. But he's another one of these guys that I think the ceiling at the tight end position is just generally so low that even Darren Waller in his worst week still, probably finishes as a tight end one. He's still better than most, even at his worst. He's a guy that I will slate up. His upcoming schedule, he's got the Chiefs, Browns, Denver Broncos. As you mentioned, don't think he'll be there for the Chiefs, but I think you slot him back in pretty immediately. I think if he's healthy enough to be there, he's a guy that I would trust.
I got another question for you about the playoffs. How do you handle upside versus floor? Because when you're playing in these games, are you just trying to have the highest potential ceiling possible? Or are you going to play guys in your lineups that are guaranteed in the PPR league 12 points? It's just a rock solid 12 points. I know he's not going to win the league for me, but it's better than having a 2-point week from, let's say, a little bit streakier of a receiver. How do you handle that?
My general philosophy, I try to get a little bit of both. I try to get a couple of those assets that I know are just going to pave the way, set the foundation for your team so that they, you have a relatively safe floor. Kind of crazy. One of the names that comes to mind for me in these fantasy playoffs is Hunter Renfrow. I think
that's
he's
exactly
going to
what
be
I
one
was
of these
thinking
guys.
of, right? Yeah.
He's going to be one of the foundations, I think, to a championship roster in the least sexy way possible. The hairline of your championship roster won't be looking too strong, but hey, we got we got Hunter Renfrow. He's gonna set the table there. But I think you have to do a couple of these little building blocks. But I mean, generally speaking, my philosophy when you're in the fantasy playoffs, it's go big or go home.
Mhm.
That is literally the time you need to capitalize on your upside here. That's what you're here for. That's what we're here for. You save I like at the gym, when I'm doing, I know I got an all out coming up,
Uh-huh.
all out effort. I save a little bit of juice for the end. That's what I save my juice for. It's all about upside for me in the playoffs because that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I've got one more question about the playoff strategy. Do you just, not talking injury, but just guys that maybe have underperformed a little bit? Do you ride your studs, or are you looking for guys that have really good matchups that you could exploit? For example, I have a league at running back. It's a 2 running back, start league where I have Saquon Barkley, Cordero Patterson, and James Conner. It seems like you have to start Saquon Barkley because you invested so much, but is that necessarily the case?
I think you take a look at matchups in that circumstance. Generally speaking, I am a start your studs kind of person. Like
What
I
if your
was
stud
very
hasn't been a stud?
that's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been a stud.
Right.
So if there's a nice playoff schedule in the picture for them in the coming season, I think you consider putting them in your lineup. But at this point in the season, like Saquon Barkley is not a must start. He's had a couple of really strong games
Mhm.
to close out the season. They've got the Cowboys, Eagles, and Bears. Like the Bears in week 17, I don't think that it's an unstoppable matchup, but like that's not a game I'm projecting lots of scoring for. I'm not going to project Saquon Barkley to have lots of goal
Yep.
line opportunities. Their quarterback isn't healthy. This is a situation where I think you do have to roll with Conner because he has been the one that's actually performed, and he did so even with Chase Edmonds in the lineup.
I agree with you. It just seems really weird. If you would have told me, Kate, at the beginning of the year, hey, you're going to be starting Cordero Patterson and James Conner over Saquon Barkley, and Barkley's healthy, I never would have believed it. Actually, I would have believed it with Cordero because he's a star. I knew that.
He's always been the stud.
All right, let's take one more quick break so I can tell you guys about Stance. Founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. With a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity, Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside some of the pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Just use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. All right, let's do some promotion commotion because this is a crazy week. Who are some guys, Kate, that you're considering promoting from either deep on your bench or on the waiver wire into your starting lineup?
All right. So I do want to preface this by saying that I wish we would have had this podcast last night because I think we should have seen maybe James Washington coming as a potential boom play here, just due to the matchup, due to the fact that the Minnesota Vikings have been allowing so much to the wide receiver position. I really wish we had that opportunity to try to get him in here. But we do not.
That's all right. We could
Would you have felt
reactively say go start
comfortable?
James Washington.
Would you have ever felt comfortable promoting him into your active lineup?
James Washington, no, but KJ Osborne, yes, just because I think there was going to be more targets. I don't think we could have anticipated Chase Claypool getting benched in the first quarter.
Well, I think we might have to anticipate that moving forward, just given the situation, because things are not pretty there for Chase Claypool. Otherwise, let's talk about maybe some really gross names like I don't know, maybe some Jacksonville Jaguars. What do we think
Oh,
about some
yes.
Jacksonville
Listen,
Jaguars?
Laquan Treadwell is not even gross anymore. He's a must start.
I do think Laquan Treadwell will have a nice position. They're going up against Tennessee, allowing the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position throughout the season. I think this is going to be, a closer matchup. Like Tennessee is not the good team that I think they project themselves to be with their record, but they're not allowing like a ton of yards, but they are allowing touchdowns, and I think the opportunity will be there for Laquan Treadwell.
All right, 2 Jets receivers. You go from Jacksonville, I'll raise you the Jets. Jameson Crowder and Keelan Cole. So Elijah Moore sounds like he's probably going to miss this week. At least that's the latest report that I saw. Corey Davis out for the year with a core injury. Jameson Crowder, like we know he's a good football player, and whenever he plays, he gets a ton of targets. Last week, 4 catches for 62 yards. Last season was pretty productive, 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he's almost a lock to get you 10 PPR points. And then there's Keelan Cole, who's also just a really underrated player. If you needed somebody, I think both of those guys are good options.
I actually love this. Keelan Cole's been a guy that I've loved watching play football. Just in general, I think he's been a really fun guy to watch. How about this one? Also doesn't feel super great, but let's go to the Titans. I'm not sure. Obviously, we don't know certainly if we're going to see Julio Jones in the active lineup. Would you feel comfortable starting any of these wide receivers here? Just on the whim that they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position this season.
No.
I
mean, it's Golden Tate maybe this week a little bit. It's no. That passing offense is so gross. Sorry.
Their rushing offense is so gross. The Titans
their
are
whole
gross,
team.
folks.
I don't understand how this team is 8-4. It's so weird that they could potentially be like the 1 or 2 seed in the conference.
It is what's that show where they're like the points don't matter.
Whose line is it anyways?
Yes. The Titans are literally the spokespeople for whose line is it anyway. But I do want to give a shout out, Nick. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. So like, excuse me for this poor pronunciation, probably. Nick Westbrook Ikeen. Do we know that's how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yep.
I think he does potentially have some upside here. 8 targets, 6 targets over the last 2 weeks. Had a 100-yard performance. Didn't do you any favors last week. Only had 2 catches for 25 yards, but he did get the score to save your day. Depending on the status of Julio Jones, I would keep an eye on this guy because I do think the matchup is at least right against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They should be able to find some breathing room in the passing game.
Last one for you, Kate. Taysom Hill. I know he's probably owned in your leagues after a big fantasy game last week, but he's dealing with mallet finger. They play the Jets this week in New York. I don't know how much success he's going to have throwing the ball. I mean, I don't know if the finger injury even matters too much, but he's just such a good runner. So would you feel comfortable starting him this week?
Yes, and as an extension, I want to give a shout out to Nick Vannett, tight end for the New Orleans Saints, who is probably going to start in some of my really gross dynasty leagues where I don't have a stud wide receiver. He's a bit widely available. You have Deontay Harris, who's been just the lead guy for the Saints, officially out for a 3-game suspension. The matchup against the Jets is absolutely perfect. I think Nick Vannett could actually put up some points in this one, and my bet is that he finishes as a tight end 1 this week.
I like it. Former Steeler. You always have to end the show with a Steeler reference, right?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. That's it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday. If you guys are in your fantasy playoffs, good luck. We're rooting for you. If you have a great week, come back and listen to the show on Monday. If you lose, come back and listen to the show on Monday. We'll be talking about next season already. So that's the great thing about the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. You can follow Kate at FF Ball Blast. You can follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. And I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Good luck in week 14, and we'll see you next time.